Happiness through curiosity on TRS Clips.
Do you know how the Chinese political system works?
I mean, all I know is it's a one-party state.
Yeah, but why does it work? Because there's lots of one parties. Okay, so this guy, Eric X. Lee, who gave a talk on this 10 years ago, and some of it's outdated, but it's probably the best talk I've seen on this for an English language audience. It might be a more up-to-date one. But basically the way it works is this. You can't do something in China like, you can't have something like Obama or Trump where he went from community organizer or no government experience to like running the entire government. That can't happen in China. Instead, what happens is if you are interested in being part of the government, you join the party, which is itself competitive. There's like, you have to do exams and stuff. I think it's like about 6% of Chinese are members of the party. Okay. So it's like 100 million people, but it's only 6%. Okay. B, you fill out whatever Marxist theory stuff you have to do within the party. You attend the meetings and all this kind of, you also have to maintain, it's like running for office. You have to make sure that you're not gambling and drinking. You have to like maintain a reputation for character or whatever, and people will review that. Then perhaps you are appointed as mayor of like some 100-person village or something like that, okay? Then if you do really well on that, on the numbers, and you show economic growth and development, then you can run a 1,000-person town, and then a 10,000-person city, and then 100,000 person, and then a 1,000,000-person province, and so on and so forth, okay? And it's kind of like a giant corporation where they start you off as dog catcher, and then you level all the way up. And if you look at Xi's history, that's exactly what he did. He ran larger and larger and larger parts of China until he got to the Central Committee. He's running the whole thing, right? Now, that's not to say he's good. Again, I always have to say this. Just to understand how they operate as a giant corporation where you can't just go and run a 1 billion person country until you run a 100 million person thing or a 10 million person thing, and you deliver enough numbers. Now, those numbers could be faked. There's patronage involved as well. Like, okay, on the margins, this guy only delivered 90% growth, and this guy, or 9 percentage points growth, and this guy delivered 15. But I like this guy more, so he gets promoted. It's like a corporation where the numbers matter, but so do the relationships. Okay, still, that's kind of how it runs, right? And that's different from how India operates. It's different from how the U.S. operates. Why'd I get on that? There's a reason I got on that. The one party thing, right? So the main thing is though that the way that China is set up now, it's not like Soviet communism. It's not like Maoism. It's not all chaos. It's very hierarchical and organized, right? What they did is they used this leftist thing of communism to justify rightist hierarchy. Okay? They have the label on it. And this is actually very common in history. Okay. For example, Christianity was originally the religion that tore down the Roman Empire, but then it set up the Holy Roman Empire and, was justification for hierarchy and for like the Christian kings and so on, right, of the Middle Ages. And, if you can look at this over and over again. For example, the Republicans were the revolutionary left party in 1861, ending slavery and so on in the USA. Okay. They were called the Radical Republicans. And then they became actually the right, the conservatives, because basically what happens is the left-wing party, if it's successful, has a bunch of slogans. It's like a religious movement. It wins power, and it has moral authority. Moral authority leads to economic authority. Economic authority means they become the rich, they become the right, and then there's an attack by a new left that arises. Okay, that's like this cycle. I talk about this in the Network State book. But point is that just like China kind of has rebuilt its ancient civilization with the name of communism, India is rebuilding its ancient civilization with the name of democracy. And there's obviously a lot of democratic aspects that are still preserved, right? In the sense of like, there's more popularity for Modi than there is for Biden. Like the voting and elections, all that stuff is happening. But it doesn't have the irrational parts of where US democracy has gotten to, right? It's actually good because in the event that the US really face plants in this upcoming financial crisis, and we can talk about that. Dahlia, lots of people are seeing something huge on the horizon. Okay, really, we're in the middle of it in some ways, but actually recognized as such. If and when that happens, and Western democracy takes a huge hit, we'll be very lucky that Indian democracy is around, because otherwise everyone will just run the Chinese stack. Because China basically has a turnkey stack. Any country, it's Africa, it's South America, you turn this key and Chinese engineers will come, they'll build your roads, build your bridges, they'll install WeChat, they'll install Alipay. Your country will actually be, they'll have roads and everything will work, but the private keys are in China. And that's the thing, the V1 American is like, oh, the Chinese are an ideological power. They're trying to export communism all over the world, et cetera. The V2 is to roll your eyes at that and say, actually, no, look, the Chinese are just there to do business. They're just there to export. They're really not ideological anymore. They're not Maoists anymore in the same way. Yeah, Xi is a nationalist, but they don't think that their model can be exported. But the V3 is to say, that's true. However, when they go and put the Chinese model into a country, they're going to put the software stack there as well, which is WeChat and Alipay and all that stuff. And that has embedded within it ideological assumptions, and it has the server and the root control back in China. So it's software that is the intersection between the economic and the ideological. Right? Okay. And so that V3 is basically, this is actually where India should be positioning, where it should have an alternative civilizational stack that it can export. Other is actually kind of part of that. It's actually being, pieces of that are being used by like Southeast Asia, like, India stack in general is something that a lot of countries are looking at. If you can make it work for India, you can make it work anywhere. And because of the scale and complexity and so on of it.
What is the India stack in your eyes?
What is India stack in my eyes? It's UPI, it's Other, it's a set of technologies that have been developed for payments and identity, and now DEPA with data and so on and so forth.
Technologically super advanced,
yes,
which will then protect you from possible wars on your country, because this conversation began in
wars. Yeah, right. So yeah, basically India exporting parts of its culture. I mean, Buddhism, the thing about China is, remember we were talking about how China plays a great home game, right? China's also historically, it's, or currently right now, it's an amazing physical goods exporter, net. But it's also actually a culture importer. Buddhism is imported, communism is imported, and a fair amount of the tech, ideology was imported, right? They're amazing at taking that and customizing that and so on and so forth. And they have their own rich culture or what have you. But they're like, I would argue, a net culture importer. We don't usually think of that as another set of the books. India arguably is the opposite.
Yeah.
Or at least is more competitive in the sense of, yoga and meditation and stuff like that have been exported. But I think we're just at the beginning of truly exporting, quote, Indian culture. And when I say, by the way, India becomes a media superpower earlier, and let me come back to the war thing. A lot of people immediately think that means Indian accented guys in Bollywood are going to become really popular worldwide. That's not what I mean. What I mean is when you sit on a chair like this, we don't think of this as a Chinese chair. It's a global chair that probably happened to have been made in China, right? So India becomes a media superpower means people are consuming media content that is globally competitive and just happens to be made in India, maybe by Indian people with Indian accents. It could be a video game, for example. It could be virtual reality. It could be AI created content, but it is globally competitive. And then you look in the fine print and it's like, oh, happened to be made by an Indian, right? Or it's made by somebody who's pseudonymous. A lot of Indians are actually pseudonymous on social media because they speak English fluently, or they type English without an accent. And this way, nobody can be like, oh, I don't know this random guy or whatever. They aren't discriminated against on the basis of follows, right? Okay.
So these are playlists made especially for you. We've tailor-made learning experiences for you on TRS Clips.